Style. You've probably heard it said that some of us have it and some of us don't. In truth, all of us have a style of some sort, and so does everything around us. Style is simply the way something is done. Style comes to mind naturally when we think of clothes or jewelry. But every aspect of our world has style. For instance, this store has style. Those aspects of style are there for a reason. Excuse me, sir. I wonder if you'd tell me why it is you shop here.
Well, actually, I'm looking for a present for my wife.
Well, yes, but why here?
Oh, I always shop for her at this boutique. The style's very up to the minute. My wife's a very up-to-the-minute person.
Well, what about the store itself?
The decorating is very current, I'd say. Like the clothes, but it rather inspires confidence. I feel sure that what I buy here will satisfy my wife's desires to be avant-garde.
But what if the style of the store didn't suit your wife and didn't suit your needs as a gift buyer? You wouldn't shop here then?
Oh, absolutely not.
Style is everywhere.
Wouldn't you rather sleep in a sea of softness?
Johnny the Badger, Mr. New Wave, coming to you from the pie in the sky. That's right, folks. We're gonna get up, get down.
In Buffalo, Mexico, a bus crash claims 32. Meanwhile, nearer home...
What you hear on radio, television, and in conversation is another kind of style of language. There are almost as many of these as there are people. One useful way of grouping styles of language is under the headings formal, informal, and non-standard.
Mr. Crisp, the evidence before this court with respect to your conduct on the night of February 21st is clear.
Formal language is seldom used in casual conversation. The sentences tend to be long and intricate. The rules of grammar are strictly followed. The vocabulary is specific to the purpose.
The evidence verifies that you entered the overshoe room of Martin Chaplin High School on that night, and when the people in the building were preoccupied with a basketball game, you filled all the rubber overshoes with wet cement. Have you any explanation for this act of vandalism?
I just thought it'd be funny, I guess.
Non-standard language breaks the grammatical rules that formal language follows. A small vocabulary is stretched to fit all subjects.
I never figured I'd get busted for it.
Your Honor, could defense counsel have a brief word with the defendant?
Of course.
Can you be a little bit more respectful? The least you could do is look like you're trying to be a bit sorry.
Yeah.
Like formal language, and unlike non-standard, informal language is grammatically correct. It differs from formal in that it is more conversational. The sentences are shorter and simpler. Personal pronouns like I and we are used as well as contractions.
try and look sorry, at least.
Which type of language you choose should depend on your purpose, your audience, your subject, and the situation you're in.
My grammar has to be proper, and what I say has to be legally precise. I achieve precision through the use of specific legal terms. I assure you I don't speak like that at home. Also, here in court, if a defendant doesn't understand the formal legal terms and procedures, I explain them informally.
Like the judge, I have to be legally precise in what I say. That calls for formal language. The formality also shows respect for the judge and the court. But with my clients, I speak informally. Partly that's to ensure that they understand me. It also puts them at their ease.
I talk this way because I don't know no other way. Right now, believe me, I wish I did. I think I might be blowing it.
The styles of language would be much easier to notice if this scene was changed slightly.
So you think this is funny, eh? Well, let me tell you, I don't see nothing funny about it.
Well, a certain lack of humor has been noted in this court.
Get that creep out of my court. I don't understand nothing he says.
In order for communication to be effective, the style of language has to be appropriate. Exactly the same holds true for written language. Literature can and does use all types of language, but in order for the communication to be effective, the choice must fit the context. Choice of language is just one of many aspects of literary style. The writer chooses a tone to echo through the work: happy, sad, ironic. Words are chosen to conjure up images and emotions in the reader's mind. The sentences are structured to produce a flow, a rhythm. Through simile, metaphor, personification, and imagery, the writer sparks the imagination of the reader. Most writers would probably say that the choice of these elements of style is partly deliberate and partly unconscious or inspirational. But however chosen or found, the appropriateness of style determines whether or not the work communicates. The Lamp at Noon was written by Sinclair Ross. It is a short story about the harsh realities of the Saskatchewan prairie during the Dust Bowl years of the 1930s. A lonely woman, a newborn child, a dust storm. These are the strands that Ross has woven together with stylistic magic to take us to that place and time.
A little before noon, she lit the lamp. Demented wind fled keening past the house, a wail through the eaves that died every minute or two. Three days now without respite it had held. The dust was thickening to an impenetrable fog. In dim, fitful outline, the stable and oat granary still were visible. Beyond, obscuring fields and landmarks, the lower of the dust clouds made the farmyard seem an isolated acre, poised aloft above a somber void. At each blast of wind it shook, as if to topple and spin, hurtling with the dust reel into space. He was not coming yet. As she watched, there was a sudden rift overhead, and for a moment, through the tattered clouds, the sun raced like a wizened orange. It shed a soft, diffused light, dim and yellow, as if it were the light from the lamp reaching out through the open door. She would have liked to rock him, to feel the comfort of his little body in her arms. But fear had obsessed her that in the dust-filled air he might contract pneumonia. There was dust sifting everywhere. Her own throat was parched with it. The table had been set less than 10 minutes, and already a film was gathering on the dishes.
It's not time for you to be hungry. Daddy's coming for dinner.
If you feel a bit of a shock at being back in the bright light and quiet, it's a sign that Sinclair Ross was successful in moving you back through the decades to the 30s in Saskatchewan. It is not mere magic or coincidence that enables him to do this. It is careful maneuvering of the elements of literary style. The story is about terrible loneliness and insanity created by long prairie dust storms. The effects on the mind grew from the vicious assault of wind and dust on the senses. To make us feel that process, Ross used imagery, words appealing to the senses. He made us smell and taste and feel the dust that Ellen breathed, that parched her throat and sifted through the muslin protecting her child. We see the dirt-obscured outlines of buildings. We feel the house shake. To sharpen those images even more, Ross used figurative language. The sun was not fixed in the sky. It raced through the tattered clouds like a wizened orange. Because of the figure of speech, the scene becomes hotter, drier, more powerful. The words used to describe the house in storm are concrete, soft, diffused light, dim and yellow. Using abstract words, that phrase could have been, the light was poor. With concrete words, you can put a vivid image in the mind of a reader. With abstract words, you cannot. Ross wanted us to feel the dust and loneliness of the storm. The imagery, the figures of speech, the concrete words, and the tone of sadness add up to those feelings. In other words, he successfully achieved his purpose through style. Countless other writers have dealt with the Depression years, and each approach is different. The difference in human perception and the way people feel toward language will always translate into different styles. Sinclair Ross's stylistic approach isn't the only one. It is simply a very effective one. Now, let's go back even farther in time, to 1880-81. The collected works of Billy the Kid is a prose poetic tale about one of frontier America's most notorious robbers and gunmen. It was written by Michael Ondaatje, a native of Sri Lanka, now living in Canada.
Garrett moved us straight to the nearest railroad depot. We had to wait one night for the train that would take us to Mesilla, where they would hold the trial. They removed Charlie off his horse. Garrett took over and washed the dried blood off the animal. Garrett ordered a box for Charlie Bowdre. They had to carry the three of us from the horses to the beds. We couldn't walk after the week on horses. I was to share a room with Garrett and Emery.
Your last good bed, Billy. Pick your position.
He chained me to the bed. He taped my fingers so thick I couldn't get them through a trigger guard even if they gave me a gun. Then he went out and looked after Wilson, who had broken both ankles when the horse stumbled, collapsing on his chained legs. It is afternoon still, the room white with light. My last white room. The sun coming through, making the white walls whiter. I lie on my cheek, looking to that light. I cannot even see the door, or if Emery has stayed behind. The bed, vast. Went to sleep, my body melting into it. I remember once after Charlie and I stopped talking, we could hear flies buzzing in their black across the room. And I remember once, one night in the open, I turned to say goodnight to Charlie, who was about 10 yards away, and there was the moon, balanced perfect on his nose.
It is the order of the court that you be taken to Lincoln and confined to jail on May the 13th. And that on that day, between the hours of sunrise and noon, you be hanged on the gallows until you are dead. 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 And may God have mercy on your soul.
Billy escaped, by the way, that time. In this prose poem, Michael Ondaatje's artistic purpose is very different from that of Sinclair Ross. Ross showed us how the wind and storm worked on the senses and then the mind of Ellen. He chose a point of view close to Ellen, but outside of her. Ondaatje became Billy the Kid and saw events from inside Billy's mind. Michael Ondaatje's style of language had to be very different. He had to speak in a way that we would accept as being Billy's way. He matched his style to content. These two works are very different in most respects, but there is a similarity in the use of words. Like Ross, Ondaatje uses concrete words: white light, dried blood, chained legs. These concrete words help him to create a series of striking visual images. Though written in a prose form, Billy the Kid has the prominent rhythm of poetry. To understand where this rhythm comes from, we have to look at the actual configuration of the sentences. Garrett took over and washed the dried blood from the animal. Garrett ordered a box for Charlie Beaudry. Most of the sentences are structured the same. The sentence starts with the subject. The verb follows. And the details are added after the verb until the sentence is complete. These are called loose sentences, and the effect of following one with another is a chant-like rhythm. Much has been written about Billy the Kid. Writers of the 19th century often sensationalized him, made him larger than life. Non-fiction writers have since tried to whittle him down to more human dimensions. Ondaatje is probably the first and possibly the last to approach Billy the Kid in the form of a rhythmic prose poem. If you were to write about him, your style would almost certainly differ again. A subject of more current interest to writers is the way in which some women are kept from achieving their potential by overprotective husbands or by society itself. In the short story Mrs. Golightly and the First Convention, Canadian writer Ethel Wilson took a rather unusual approach to that subject. Mrs. Golightly is a very shy woman, not used to being very far from her home in Vancouver. Mr. Golightly is a consulting engineer, likable, outgoing, and well known in the business of traction. The story tells us what happens when Mr. Golightly asks Mrs. Golightly to accompany him to a convention in Del Monte, her first. By this time, Mrs. Golightly was feeling unusually bold and responsible and quite like a woman of the world. She thought to herself, come now, everyone is being so lovely and trying to make everyone feel at home, and I must try too.
Hi, I don't think we met, did we? My name is Mrs. Golightly, and I come from British Columbia.
I'm pleased to meet you. I'm Mrs. Gampish, and I come from Toledo, Ohio.
This is a beautiful hotel, isn't it? Wouldn't you like to see the gardens?
And then somehow everyone was moving. She got into a nice car with some other ladies whom she did not know. Mrs. Golightly was the smallest and sat in the middle. Well, we better introduce ourselves, she thought. But the lady on her right had already explained that she was Mrs. Johnson from Seattle. So she turned to her left and said to the other stranger,
Please tell me your name. I'm Mrs. Golightly, and I'm from British Columbia.
Well, I'm Mrs. Gampish, and I'm from Toledo, Ohio.
Oh, Mrs. Gampish, how stupid of me. I'm sorry. We met in the tap room, of course. So many people.
What we learn from this is that when selecting an appropriate style, it doesn't necessarily mean we have to opt for the obvious choice. In writing about a woman who was patronized by her husband, many writers would have chosen to drive their points home one by one with a big stick. But Ethel Wilson chose a more subtle approach. By selecting the character Mrs. Golightly, Wilson ruled out from the start an explosive, thundering story full of conflict. Mrs. Golightly would never rebel violently. She probably wouldn't think it ladylike. Just as Ondaatje chose language to suit the character of Billy the Kid, Wilson geared her style of language to the personality of Mrs. Golightly. Sheltered and overprotected, Mrs. Golightly is a bit like a child stepping hesitantly into a world full of adults. The small words, simple ideas, and uncomplicated sentences reflect the shy child's way that Mrs. Golightly thinks and the delicate, hesitant way she acts. What was Ethel Wilson's purpose? First, I think she wanted to amuse us. And perhaps while amusing us, she wanted to convince us that too many people get trapped in small worlds like Mrs. Golightly's. And how did she amuse us? By creating characters we would recognize and identify with, and by putting them in situations that were awkward and at times ridiculous. The tone is never harsh or angry. It is as gentle as Mrs. Golightly. In all the works we've looked at, style has been a neat marriage of subject, purpose, situation, and audience. In no case was the choice of style slavish. It was always an intelligent and original series of decisions. In your own writing, you will need to develop that mixture of inspiration and common sense that will produce a style at once appropriate and original. There is no formula for style, but the choice of stylistic elements begins with a few simple questions. For whom are you writing? For children? Adults? A college professor? A general audience? What is your purpose? To move that audience to tears or laughter? To depress them for a month? What is your subject matter? A battle in medieval Europe? A high school romance? Baseball? Are you writing a high school essay, a lyric poem, a business report? On those basic foundations, a literary style is built.